Well, first I want to make perfectly clear that I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not for the biopharmaceutical industry, not for USTR, not for White House, not for Chairman Hatch. I'm just an old guy who's been doing this a long time and might be able to explain a few things. So, and I'm here to talk about biopharmaceuticals. So, TPP has quite a few provisions on biopharmaceuticals, but the issue that's really front and center is the period of data protection for biologic medicines. So first I should explain what's a biologic medicine. Well, unlike traditional chemical medicines, we call small molecule medicines, which are really just simple chemicals, biologics are these large folding protein compounds that are derived from living cells. And so what that means is that a generic version of a traditional medicine is really just a chemical copy, whereas there's really a quote, generic version of a biologic medicine is not an exact copy because they're these big folding complicated proteins. So a generic biologic is actually called a biosimilar. And that's a very important point for later. In the United States, the Affordable Care Act provides 12 years of data protection for biologic medicines. What does that mean? Well, that means that when a company creates a biologic medicine and it goes to the FDA and it submits its dossier of data, very expensive data, often more than $1 billion, to create all the health and safety testing data. These are the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 human trials to prove the safety and efficacy of the medicine. When a company submits that data to the FDA, and the FDA relies on that data to approve the medicine for human use, no other company can rely on that same data to get approval for a biosimilar for a period of 12 years. That's what the Affordable Care Act said. And that period was not chosen out of thin air. That was chosen to try to replicate what I think is almost universally recognized, incredibly successful Hatch-Waxman Act in 1984, which paved the way for the generic traditional medicines to be sold in the United States. Hatch-Waxman successfully balanced the need for the innovator to have a certain period of exclusive rights to sell a traditional medicine in the United States in order to recoup investments and make some profit, with the need to get lower cost generics available in the United States in a reasonable period. So Congress looked to Hatch-Waxman to try to translate that incredibly successful experience for small molecule or traditional medicines into this new biologics world. And what Congress did is they said, okay, let's look at, in practice, how long have traditional medicines, have innovator companies had the exclusive rights to sell this traditional medicine in the United States with the 5 years of data protection that Hatch-Waxman offers, along with patent protection. What's the actual experience? And so Congress looked at a whole host of medicines and determined that in practice, the period of exclusive rights has been about 12 to 14 years. So Congress then looked to biologics and said, well, you know, biologics are these big folding proteins. They're not exactly equivalent. Biosimilars are not exactly equivalent to biologics. And what that means is that patent protection provides a weak means by which to afford exclusive rights. So all Congress had to work with was the data protection. So if Congress wanted to try to replicate Hatch-Waxman for a biologics universe, it had to rely on data protection. And looking at traditional medicines, which have 12 to 14 years of experience, Congress chose the number on the low end of that spectrum and gave biologics 12 years of data protection in the United States. So, what is the period in TPP? Well, during the negotiations, the United States pushed hard for 12 years because of TPA, as many people I'm sure know. There's a principal negotiating objective in TPA that our trade agreements should include a standard of intellectual property protection that, quote, reflects a standard of protection similar to that found in United States law. And it was critical to the industry, the biopharmaceutical industry, to get that provision right. The biologics medicines are truly the future of the industry. And many in Congress agreed and thought that this Hatch-Waxman model was really the right approach. In particular, Chairman Hatch, who has been a longtime champion of intellectual property his entire time in Congress, and folks may know he himself is an IP rights holder, having written many songs. In the end, our trading partners wouldn't agree to 12 years of data protection. What they agreed to was sort of a two-pronged commitment. Countries could either provide 8 years of data protection for biologics, or 5 years plus, quote, other measures and market circumstances to deliver a comparable outcome in the market. Well, the industry was very upset with that, as was Chairman Hatch. He thinks it's not long enough. and that the market circumstances test is unclear. He is a true believer in IP. He thinks that innovative products in the United States, that's truly our comparative advantage, and that we really, if the United States doesn't stand up for intellectual property rights, nobody else will. The White House insists that they got the best they could under the circumstances, and that reopening the TPP agreement would unravel it. I absolutely take them at their word. If Prabir were here, I would tell him what I often tell him. I would tell him in front of all of you what I often tell him to his face, which is that he has the hardest job in government. So I have no doubt they tried to get 12 years, they couldn't in the end, and we are where we are. The industry position remains that 12 years is the right period for data protection for biologics, but the industry will follow Chairman Hatch's lead. And my understanding is that Chairman Hatch is speaking with the administration, and that every indication is that there is an enormous amount of goodwill to resolve this issue on both sides. I have no insight into exactly what that resolution will be. And I'm certainly not in the business of telling Chairman Hatch what he should do. All I can do is look at my crystal ball. And when I do, it seems to me that the outlines, well, there's some hints as to what may constitute part of the resolution. First, a logical place to start would be to provide a little bit more clarity and certainty on what the TPP obligation means to afford, to achieve a comparable market outcome. But my guess is there may need to be more. People may have seen the Finance Committee had a hearing a week or so on lessons learned from past FTAs. And the panel found, unanimously really, the need for greater enforcement of our trading partners' commitments. A fact sheet that was distributed along with the hearing notice pointed out several IP areas in particular in which our FTA partners have not really lived up to their obligations. Australia, patent linkage, the Canada Promise Utility Doctrine, Peru, patent term restoration, data protection in Chile. These are all TPP partner countries who have existing obligations that they have not yet met. So, looking in my crystal ball, I could see part of the resolution is Congress getting more comfortable that the commitments made in TPP will truly be enforced, including, very importantly, in transition periods. Because often the problem comes that the United States certifies entry into force of these agreements, but there are transition periods for various obligations to phase in, and when the transition period is over, the country doesn't actually live up to their commitments, and we have no more leverage. So I foresee there could be a deal on some sort of commitments or making sure the commitments are met through the certification process, perhaps through giving Congress a more active role in entry into force, or maybe some other means that I haven't thought of. The last thing I'll say is on timing. There's no question in my mind that there can be a deal. There can be some way to get some comfort to Chairman Hatch and everyone that TPP can move forward, but it takes time. I think it could be done quickly if there really were people putting their shoulder to the wheel, and I have every indication that that's starting to happen. So it's my hope that there will be some agreement in the relatively short term.